Yeah, that's right. Put it on your shirt pocket. Yeah, put it on your collar or something like that. Then they can hear you on the internet.
Right about there. I get your attention.
Listen up. Showtime.
All right, 7 o'clock. We got to get going here with reservations on the Facebook Live. First and foremost, thanks to each and every one of you for coming out. Really exciting to do a combined riding event here. A few of us have made the trip out from Brooks to be here tonight, and some of the communities that fall a little closer to this side of the riding for us. So thanks to each and every one of you for coming. I'm Clayton Ratcliffe. I'm the president for the CA for Brooks Medicine Hat. And again, a special thank you to the team here for Medicine Hat Cyprus for agreeing to put this on with us tonight. And big thanks to everybody that's come to share this stage with Paul this evening. So we're getting into a different look at how politics are being done. And I think it's high time. We've had a pretty raw deal for a long time, and we finally got the momentum and a party that's saying enough is enough. And it's time for your average everyday Albertan to have some say in how things go and how decisions are made, what impacts us, because it's sure not happening how we're doing. You know, the recycle politics, the emotional voting, it's just a wash. It's a loss. You know, and as said by Senator Ted Cruz from the great state of Texas, the all-seeing eye does not control us. And it's funny that he was actually born at the Foothills Medical Center in Calgary. So he was. So, you know, the political science degrees, the law degrees, all these pandering, being trained to sell a party on you. They forgot you're supposed to sell your people to the party. Right. That's how it's supposed to go. It's not happening. We're going to change that. Yeah, I had a bunch written down here, but there's a lot more qualified, well-spoken people than myself to be here. But you know, if I take it upon myself to get involved, I'm no politician. I chase cattle around, and it's time to do things differently. That's exactly why I'm here. I got 3 daughters. I'm very concerned about what's going to be left for them. I mean, quite frankly, we're running out of time pretty darn quick. And that being said, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll pass you on to Gary Proctor, who is the president for the CA here in Cypress Medicine Hat. So thanks again, everybody, for coming out and doing what we have to say.
Push the microphone on your shirt, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out. My name is Gary Proctor, and about a week ago, I had the honor of being elected the president of the Constituency Association for Cypress Medicine Hat Wild Rose. Thank you. Wild Rose is where I started. Unfortunately, we were led astray. We amalgamated with a party that is probably the worst party we've ever had in Canada, and that's Jason Kenney. My motivation for this is I've had a 45-year building career in Medicine Hat and surrounding area. There's virtually not a road I can't drive down and stop in someplace for coffee. And I no longer will sit back and see what's happening, what Justin Trudeau is doing, and what's worse, what Jason Kenney is allowing him to do to this country. As I see it, what is happening here is we have Eastern Canada making a move to take over the resources of Western Canada, i.e., we are another Newfoundland where we will be the laborers. All of the windmill towers that are going in, Ontario companies. One of the trucks ended up in a friend of mine's ditch canal this morning at 6:30. Ontario license plates, on his way to put in wind turbines. SNC-Lavalin, I have another friend working for them as a laborer. They're reclaiming all of our oil and gas wells.
French-Canadian.
And we're going to become laborers. And that's how they think of us. And if we're going to allow that to happen, then guess what? That's what we think of us too. And I don't think that's the way it is. So we're going to fight back. We're going to put together a good party. If you ask me why we now have a situation where an MP, elected MP, can't walk down the street without him and his family being accosted, and yet the lights don't come on. They don't understand. Why are people so mad at us? I can't answer that. So let's put in somebody who can walk down the street and shake hands with people like everybody here is doing. Jason Kenney says, let's legalize pepper spray because the poor lady with the hijab at the transit terminal is getting belittled and she should have self-defense. Do you think that there's any coincidence that it's really Tyler Shandro that got accosted and he's the one who might have to need pepper spray? It's a bit of a coincidence the two happen at the same time because I don't think Jason Kenney cares about the woman with the hijab. I don't think he cares about anybody but himself. So what we're going to do is we're going to sell as many memberships as we possibly can. Why do you need a membership? Because you need to be able to vote to select the candidate that we put on the ballot to send to Edmonton. If you don't have that, then you don't have a say. In other words, you've got about the same rights you have right now as you do with the Kenney government. We send an official, an MLA up there, and he just kicks him out. That's his attitude. So get involved. Also, how I intend to structure this CA is much like I've structured other organizations I've been on, like the Canadian Home Builders Association, 21 years with the Canada Day Society. We're going to have committee chairs from the CA pick members at large to work on committees so that we get as much involvement from within our organization as we possibly can. So we'll have a CA that is huge, really big. So all you got to do is put forward and say, listen, I'd like to get involved in something, and somebody from the CA is going to put you on a committee. And we have a meeting place. That's our home base, and an office. That's our home office. So we won't be bounced all over the place trying to figure out where we're going to go to the next meeting. It'll be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if you need to use it. We're organized. So, but we can't complete the task without everybody here. And all of your friends, and your cousins, and anybody else you can talk into coming out. That's what we need. Thank you very much. I want to thank Rick Strankman goes back a long ways with the Wild Rose. Danny Hozak, well, Danny is, you won't find a better Albertan, nor will you with Danny. So Paul and Danny, Rick, are all going to be speaking to you. Please listen. Thank you.
I don't know whether I turned it off or turned it on. It's probably just as well it's off. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for allowing me to speak here. I'm not going to necessarily speak about the Wild Rose, but what I'd like to do is show you these. These are part of a booklet, an American-based booklet, and this printed material I have for anyone who's directly interested is a copy of the preface to the little book from what's known as the American institution known as the Cato Institute, and basically the little booklets, I have two left over there, that talk about the American Declaration of Independence and then the American Constitution. Back when, in the 1750s, when guys were throwing tea in the harbor, they were fingering, this is a bouquet of those fingers, the world's largest power. And they went on then from that gutsy move to lose friends, lose family, whatever. But the founding fathers then, through a period of time, from their Declaration of Independence to achieving their independence from Mother England, the founding fathers, many of them were destroyed or lost family or whatever. They actually had a lot of skin and a lot of depth of commitment in the game, and I know some of that from my experience in the grain wars, the wheat wars, as we call them, and going forward to, I always declared, not necessarily proudly, that I was the only guy in the legislature in Edmonton there that went to jail before I got in the legislature. A lot of those guys have that to look forward to after they've been in the legislature. Thanks for the applause, because when the NDP was in the chamber, they just throw their books down. They're all mad. I don't know, they're PO'd that somebody would make note of something like that. It's called principle, I think, and that's what this group, Mr. Proctor and Mr. Clayton here, talk about, or I hope they're hoping to involve. And guys like Paul and Danny here, they know what I'm saying, but our message is to communicate that to you, because that is where the power is. That's where the true power is in the people. And if you can rise up and speak to your friends going forward, that's where the true ultimate power is. There are so many, and the names have already been mentioned. You know who I mean. I was one of the early supporters of our premier, because I consider myself a personal friend of his former boss, Kevin Avram, the founder of the Taxpayers Federation. Not the first executive directorship like Jason talks that he is. It was not his idea. They use it as a social ladder to get to a place of greatness, and then it seems that power goes to their head, and they, to quote, I'm going to use an off-color statement, to quote an aide of another guy that I've been fortunate, blessed to walk with, Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper's aide, she said, the closer people get to the power, the more they lose their shit. And unfortunately, Paul can attest to this firsthand. Danny is, many highly experienced in war wounds to prove that. So I'd like to encourage you to read these kinds of documents so that you would know what the emotion, what the mindset was. And the point is, and I had supper with a guy that's going to come here later, Drew. Drew was one of the first guys to kick back. I can tell you a bit of a backstory to kick back on the floor crossing. I remember we had a joint text, and the Saturday night before the floor crossing of the Wednesday, Drew, to our joint text, Drew sent out a text saying, I was elected Wild Rose, I'm staying Wild Rose. And I didn't know family, I'm hesitant to say, but we were holidaying in Hawaii. I didn't know that there was any of this SHIT going to happen. And so I texted out, I'm with Barnsey. And that whole string never had a response from anybody on it after that. That whole string just went dead. And I was in the third world country called Maui. My cell coverage is as good as it is in this town right here. And they all decided to, not all, there were several that stuck behind, but a good part of them, followed the leader, not recognizing, I guess is a more important way to put it, that we're elected as representatives. When I was one of the leaders for the anti-wheat board thing, I was truly one of the leaders. I was a leader of a representative group. But when I'm elected, as a representative, it's a whole other different role. And it took me a long time to understand my position. And I stand here before you tonight only as a farmer from Ontario. I have a certain amount of experience and some of the war wounds to prove that, but I don't have any greater stature than any one of you in this room. I guess I would yield to Mr. Hinman as the new leader of the WIPA party. And so with that, I'd just like to encourage you to read this sort of stuff and understand the pioneering attitude that went on by those people at that time. There's a lot of gum flapping and everything else that can happen. I went through all that in the wheat board thing, but when it came right down to it, finally, there was only 13 farmers ultimately that knew the greater goal was to embarrass a liberal government, the Chrétien government. And there was a lot of fear. Fear is a powerful tool as well. And you'll be faced with various forms of fear, bullying by friends and family saying you're losing your marbles. But you need to stick to your principles. And through all that stuff, ladies and gentlemen, it was 10 years from the time that we went to jail before Stephen actually got the majority government to change that law, the federal law that we were trying to fight. So it takes some time. Old salts like this here, sometimes we want to get things done tomorrow because we may not have time for it on Thursday, But it's important to kind of put things into perspective and into scope. And so with that, I'm going to be around for the whole evening. I see some of my old schoolmates here. I'm so happy you're here. It's a pleasure to see you here. And with that, I'll let Danny and Paul, Danny, to come forward and speak. So I'll be around for the whole evening. Happy to take your bouquets and your roses, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you to each one of you for taking time out of your busy lives to be here. And a special thanks to Gary and Clayton for sort of stepping up to, can you hear back there? Do you have a question, or can you hear all right? Okay. Thank you to Gary and to Clayton for stepping up to represent the CAs in this area. I've done quite a bit of this, as Rick has alluded to, and often when I mention politics to people, they say, well, I'm not interested in politics, and I always say, well, actually, my grandpa wasn't interested in war either, but he still went twice so we could have a better life, and quite frankly, we have had. So thank you for joining us and help you sort of volunteering to be this volunteer army that's sort of taking on a giant at the moment. But in any event, in 1904, Canada's Interior Minister, Clifford Sifton, said, we desire, in fact, every patriotic Canadian desires, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our own people in the East, to build up our factories and our workshops of Eastern Canada and contribute in every way to the East's prosperity. Justin's most recent budget speech assured Eastern Canadians that he and his government are intent on doubling down on Clifford Sifton's dream. This is the second time in many of our lifetimes that a federal government, supported by Eastern voters, has destroyed a generation of Albertans' accumulated wealth, along with the hopes and dreams of hundreds of thousands of families, businesses, and communities. In both cases, it happened as a direct result, a direct, calculated, and concerted attack on our energy industries. Despite having our wealth and our economy devastated twice in 2 generations, Albertans have managed to send approximately $630 billion net to Ottawa during the past 30 years. In May of 2019, Jason Kenney came to power promising to end this injustice with decisive action on equalization, followed by the creation of the Fair Deal Panel, tasked with charting a course to economic recovery for Alberta. However, today, 28 months later, the tough talk on equalization has become a promise of a referendum this fall, and the Fair Deal Panel's 6 months of meetings and studies have led to more meetings and more studies. So here we are, 115 years into Confederation and 28 months into a Jason Kenney government, and we are still standing, or perhaps kneeling, on the doorstep of Confederation with our hat in our hands and their hands in our pockets. Alberta historian Michael Wagner has recently written 2 books. The first one was called Alberta Separatism, Then and Now, and should be compulsory reading for everyone who is interested in a brighter future for our children, grandchildren, future generations, and our province. His first book is a fascinating analysis of the history of the rise and fall of separatist movements, and his second book summarizes the problem and the challenge for the West in one paragraph, and I quote, "In short, over the years, there have been plenty of proposals and attempts to improve the situation of the West within Canada. They have all failed for the same reason. Central Canada is not interested. Central Canada is completely satisfied with the status quo and knows that the West is powerless to do anything about it within the framework of Confederation. But what can Albertans do? What can you do?" The title of Michael's new book, No Other Option. He said, and it well articulates a roadmap for Alberta's future. He suggests, as does our guest this evening, Paul Himon, that we Albertans must set our mind and our efforts to achieving self-determination by implementing what Paul calls the Firewall Plus. Clearly, our newly created Wild Rose Independence Party, which has risen from formation to 20% in the polls in less than a year, is poised to be the vehicle to do just that, as we finally set a course to an independent province where all decisions about our future are made by Albertans. We are here tonight and to visit with a man who has just been elected as the party's full-time leader en route to becoming Alberta first premier. We need a premier that puts Alberta first, and Paul is committed to that. Paul and his team will always put out, yes, thank you, I think we should give him that. Paul and his team will always put Alberta's interests first, and whether Alberta is inside or outside of Canada depends on the wishes of Albertans. Paul's grandfather was the provincial treasurer for Ernest Manning, and Paul was 14 years old when his grandfather gave him a copy of Bastiat's The Law. Paul has spent his life studying, thinking, and preparing himself to deal with the economic and political challenges that are facing Alberta today. Paul is a solutions-based innovator and a penny pincher who is always looking for a new, less expensive, and more efficient way of doing business, be it his own or the province's. I want to just share 2 stories with you this evening that I think prove that point. In the fall, we did a tour to northern Alberta, and we were getting to Grand Prairie. I was driving, so Paul said, well, I'll call and get us a room. As you pull into Grand Prairie, I don't know if you've been there lately, but just like going to Medicine Hat, you drive along the main drag, there's 2 miles of 6 to 10 story fancy new hotels, and so Paul, he's getting us a room, or supposedly getting us a room. So as we're driving by, I say, well, have you got us a room? Oh yeah, we'll come to it. So pretty soon we turn into this, quaint little motel. It was quite a nice old spot, but you can tell, I think Davy Crockett stayed there in his early days. But anyway, it had been around a while. But in any event, to make a long story short, $60 for a double room. And I've been saying, if anybody here has put lots of people are careful with their own money, but very few people are careful with other people's money. And Paul was the interim leader at the time, and being careful with our money, as it turns out. And so I said, like, if anybody has been on an expense account in the last 5 years in Alberta and stayed in a $60 motel, like, come and see me after the meeting because we're looking for a finance chairman and a few candidates. So I've said this at about 10 meetings, nobody's come up yet. So but anyway, the second story that I want to tell is, I think, a little, like, it makes another point. And Paul was, when he was elected, was on a committee to select the new Auditor General. The old Auditor General had retired. So when they got down to a short list of 3, Paul said, well, why don't we invite the 3 in, one at a time, of course, and ask them what price they would do this job at? And of course, the answer was just universally, well, no, you can't do that. We pay the grid. We know what he's going to get paid. We don't even debate that. He said, well, we could ask. And he said, no, we can't. You know what I mean? So anyway, they got it down to 1. Paul tried again. He said, why don't we, it turned out it was the Assistant Auditor General. Paul said, why don't we just ask him if he'll take the job at the wage he's at? Like, we just won't give him the bump up to the new wage. No, we can't do that. We have to pay the grid. That's what he gets. So that's fine. They elected the guy, or they hired the guy. About a week later, Paul was going up the elevator. Who should get on but the new Auditor General? So Paul said, well, congratulations. I think you'll do a great job. And he said, I voted for you. I'm glad you got it. He said, I'm sort of a nosy sort of a guy. I just have to ask you. He said, he said, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But he said, if we'd have asked you to take the job at your existing wage, would you have taken it? He said, of course I do. Of course I would have. He said, I love this job. And he said, if there's anybody in the province that knows how quickly we're running out of money, it's me. And I think there's 2 things that are important about that. One is, like, somebody has to have the guts to say, look, is there a different way of doing this? And we often look at the bureaucracy as if they're automatically going to be the weapon. But I think we underestimate some of them, at least, when we just assume that they will be our opponents, because most of them have kids and grandchildren too, and I don't think they really want our province to fail. And any of them that are thinking about it realize, just like we do, that there have to be some changes. So I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about Paul, he's not afraid to ask, and he can talk to these people in a way that sort of brings them on side. So having said that, Paul is a tireless listener and a lifelong learner and a humble leader. I believe that he is well suited and well prepared to lead both the Wild Rose Party and Alberta into the future. And I would ask you to join me in welcoming him to this event tonight. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Danny. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Gary and Clayton. And thank each and every one of you. Oh, I guess I better get over here so the camera doesn't have to pull right in. For coming out, because the reason why we're here, each and every one of us, is because we're concerned about the future of Alberta. And I consider each and every one of you freedom fighters and Alberta patriots, and I'm proud to be part of this group. We're in a real dilemma here. Most people seem to be oblivious to the challenges that we have. Life isn't that bad. They're not hurting to the point that perhaps people that they know are. And the challenge that we're up against is actually getting people to engage and realizing that this is a battle for our future. We have 2 options: the status quo and Ottawa determining our future, or Ottawa goes and we become self-determined and take control of those powers and I guess I want to say different areas that we need to take control of. And that's what the Wild Rose Independence Party is all about. What do we need to do to become independent, to become self-sufficient, to become self-determined, and not have Ottawa holding us in a stranglehold, wanting to see a slow death? I just am amazed every day at the new attack that we have and the tighter grip that they have on us and what they're trying to do. The lockdowns have been detrimental to many individuals, to businesses, and many that haven't survived. I had the very unfortunate situation of meeting 2 mothers who lost their children to suicide because of the lockdown. I've met too many gym owners that lost their business because they couldn't stay open. I've been up to the whistle stop with Chris Scott, who had to go to jail. The news today is that when Arthur Pawlowski comes back to Canada, they're going to arrest him and put him in jail for 21 more days. This is not the Alberta that you and I believe in. This is not the Alberta that we want to pass on to our children. And the bottom line is, if we don't stand up and fight, we're going to lose this. We have to break. we need to take the extraordinary effort to break this chokehold and say enough is enough. I love our posters that said had enough. We have. We've had too much, and it's time to do something about it. It's always interesting to me. I'm sure each and every person in here knows someone who's been in a toxic, broken, dysfunctional relationship, and the problems that they've gone through. Maybe they've left, they've come back, they've left, they've come back. And often it's 2 or 3 or 4 times before you finally have, I want to say, a family intervention, and that individual realizes the toxic situation that we're in. This is the challenge that we have with Albertans. We're not the first party to come up and say that we need independence. It's happened many times, but nobody else has been successful before. This time, though, I believe it's critical. If we're not successful this time, it'll be generations before I think there'll be another opportunity for us to be independent. And that's why it's so critical that we actually engage and put our 100% effort into this. And so what can we do? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the CA level first, and then we'll talk about what I call the 6 steps to independence. But the most critical thing, and where we win every election, is in each individual CA. Twice I have run and been successful. Both those times I started, I was below 3% in the polls, and everybody laughed and says, well, you can't win this. This is a shoe-in for the government. Well, not so. I've been elected twice, and the reason why is because of the CA and the individuals that were part of the team, and the door knocking, and the pamphlets that we handed out at the door, and the questions that we answered, and perhaps most important, the promises that we made. When I would go to the door, I'd often ask the individuals, are you happy with the current government? No. And says, well, do you think it makes a difference on who you elect? Nope, you guys are all the same once you get in there. You forget about us when you're in there. And I says, well, do you think that one person can make a difference? Nope. And I says, well, with those 3 questions, I want to ask for your vote for me. If you don't think it matters who's in there, please vote for me. And I said, but the most important thing is that if you elect me, I'll be accountable to you through recall. I says, I don't need to pass legislation. This is my promise. If 5,000 people sign a petition and want to fire me, I'll be accountable to you, the constituents here, not to anybody that's up in Alberta, or again to wanting to get in bed with anybody from Ottawa. And I think those are critical things. But then we would talk about the issues and what we have. And if you've been to our website, wildrose.party, I think you'd be thrilled to read through our principles, our policies, and how we're putting Albertans first. The proper role of government, and the reason why we have government, is to protect the individual's rights, the individual's life, the individual's property. And that's what the role of government was always for, but yet it's been lost. And as soon as you have a government that all of a sudden thinks that its role is to be the paternal patriarch and to control our lives and to control our money, it loses scope. And that's what we see day after day, is government wanting to intrude in our individual lives, taking away our freedoms. I mean, who would have thought 2 years ago that we wouldn't have the freedom of assembly to be able to go to church and worship according to the dictates of our conscience? It's happened, folks. We've got it back. It's wonderful. I've been to church, 2 or 3 times now since it was lifted. And it's exciting to be able to sing together, to be able to worship together, and to talk and to visit with one another. It's exciting to be back here and seeing everybody here, see your smiles, see your frowns, and where you're at. But this is human nature. And so can we and will we engage with our constituents? Will we get the brochures? And I meant to bring one up, but we have brochures, and we need to be able to go and go door knocking. And some people don't like the door knock, but just drop those brochures, those pamphlets off in each and every mailbox in our ridings. We've got a lot of stuff that's coming up on a new innovative website, tools to help you. But this is where we're going to win the battle, is in each CA. And Gary, he's made the commitment of growing a large CA here, and we need to do that. And then once you've got a large enough CA, my personal level is on how we're going to run each CA, because we don't want the me as the leader or the provincial board dictating who's going to run here, or have any special positions that we can, oh, I promise you this, or I do that, any favors, is that we need to grow a CA to 500 members. We need to have $5,000 in the bank. We have to have a board that has seen and talked to and feels like we have a credible candidate. And at that point, they go to the provincial board. That person will go through a professional vetting to make sure that the individual's okay. And then you, the members, will decide here who's going to represent you. And then critically important on that is the question that so many MLAs are asked well, who are you going to represent after you're elected? And how often do we hear, well, it'll be the Premier, what he has to say. No, that isn't what it is. You're to represent from the day you're elected until you lose the election or retire your constituents. That's what your job is. And with the Wild Rose Independence Party, we will have that. We want free thinkers and we want free votes in the House, and that's what we'll have, that guarantee for a member to speak out and not be punished. So anyways, going back to this idea of the proper role of government, of protecting our life, our freedoms, and our property, and our pursuit of happiness is critical. But the question is do we believe it? Are we willing to go out and put some time in it? Are we willing to raise some money so that we can get the brochures? Perhaps two things that I would love to see, and we're starting to get a few, is some signs out. When I was up at Lee Parks this last week at the rodeo, we had a nice, great big sign on the highway, said, "Had enough? Wild Rose Independence Party." How many in here, if we had those, would like a lawn sign to put on your lawn so that people could know and hear about it? We're not going to win this battle in the social media. We're not going to win it on the Main Street media. We're going to win it on our blocks. We're going to win it in our communities, and we have to be the foot soldiers that are willing to engage. And I'm excited about it because we actually have the stuff that we believe in and are willing to fight for, and I believe that we will be successful in 2023 to form the government here in Alberta. So I want to talk about the 6 steps to what I believe is the road to independence as opposed to our current road to serfdom, which we're on. Number one that we need to have is our own police force. This idea that Justin can send in the police, whether it's to take our guns or to arrest us for going to church or going to a restaurant, is wrong. And we need our own police force and our own judicial system, not the one that Ottawa currently has. Now, number two, when you have a toxic, broken, dysfunctional relationship like we have to have your own bank account. We're not going to keep sending our money to Ottawa and say, oh, by the way, can we have some lunch money? Or can we have some money to put some gas in the car? No, we will hire Albertans here in Alberta to collect the taxes for Albertans, by Albertans, all of the taxes, to stay here to serve the interest of Albertans and to pay off our debt. Those are the two big issues. Go ahead and clap on that one. It's always willing to cheer when you win the lottery, and it's also great that when you have control of your own bank account, and that's what we don't have. And then the other ones are important, but not like those first two. And I should say that for me, when I talk about the police force and the judicial system, what we need is elected civilian oversight of those entities. We need to be able to have people that are elected, that are promising to look after those things. And if there's a policeman that's out of line or doing things that aren't right, they're going to be fired. It's not going to be a union that protects them and they get to carry on. And the same with judges. I mean, if they're writing in the law and not following the Constitution, which we see here in this country, as has happened a lot this last year. I mean, how many people have been charged with tickets? How many people have been put in jail and they can't get their day in court? It's unacceptable. And it's another reason why we're saying no to Ottawa and to control our own destiny. But the smaller ones, can the pension plan? I mean, Bill Tuft has written a book on it. I don't know if many of you read, but it's a Ponzi scheme. And it's not fully funded, and it's a problem. Albertans, we contribute about $7.5 billion a year into the Canada Pension fund, and our seniors only collect back about $5 billion. So we're $2.5 billion surplus going in. There's no reason why Alberta doesn't have a pension fund that is like the Quebec pension fund, and how well that serves Quebecers, but yet we're, again, send our money and then we get a little bit back. And so we need to have that. And many people ask, oh, what about my Canada pension plan or my OAC, OAS? All of those things will still be in place. Individuals can choose. I mean, if a Canadian retires and moves down to Mexico, he still gets his Canada pension plan, and those things are there. But the important thing with the new Alberta pension plan, especially for younger people, that we can reduce the premiums, and for our seniors, we can increase the benefits, and that will be putting Albertans first, and we can do that. The next one is employment insurance, another one that causes a lot of problems, that Albertans have to work harder and longer and to pay more than most other places in Canada. We'll have our own employment insurance program that looks after Alberta laborers and puts them first. And then immigration, it's another boondoggle. I'm not sure if you saw this last week, setting a new record of the number of people that are coming in where we're locked down, can't even go to work and go around, and we have a record number of immigrants coming in. It's just unbelievable to me. We need sustainability. We need to put Albertans first, and that's what we're going to do with our immigration policy, is that we're not going to be bringing people in on your dollar and looking after them and thinking that we're doing something charitable for the world. It really bothers me that if we really cared about these other areas where they're having problems, the UN was actually set up to protect them in their homeland, not to pull them out and to basically lay them out to slaughter on the roads. And it's backwards, and we need to fix that. And then the last one, which again I actually would rank third in importance. In 1905, when we joined Confederation, we were a third-class citizen, in my opinion, and we didn't have control of our resources or the land. In 1930, Premier Brownlee went to battle and was the last, I want to say, premier who really fought with intent for Alberta. And they had the Resource Transfer Act, and with that we got control of our resources and the land. But in the 70s, Trudeau came along, and he has trumped the Resource Act with the Environmental Act. And we as Albertans do not need to be governed by hypocrites out east who don't even know what the benefits of oil and gas are, let alone the petrochemical industry, and the idea that 70% of the medical equipment that we use is from the petrochemical industry. These people are so ignorant and naive of the reality of life. It's not that they want to bite the hand that feeds them, that they want to cut it off and condemn it and say this is terrible. And if they want to live that lifestyle, they're free to do so. We don't care. But don't tell us that we're destroying our land, that we're destroying our air, we're destroying our water. They're the hypocrites. They don't understand these things. So we'll have our own environmental act, and we'll take control of the future with that environmental act. But with those steps taken and reclaiming back that power and that autonomy for Alberta, we'll become an independent state. And we can exercise that independence fully. And then the question is okay, what happens then? In order to have a successful vote on a sovereign nation, we have to make sure that Albertans realize that everything is secure, that everything is in order. And that vote will really be determined on how fast and how much animosity or how amiable Ottawa is towards us as we take those steps to become truly independent. And so everybody says, oh, set a date, set a date. No, we don't need to set a date. The fact is that when we become government, in 2023, we'll be independent because we're taking steps and looking after all of that thing and exercising our full autonomy. And then when Albertans realize that, wow, things really are great, we are able to trade now, we've got pipelines to the coast, we're dealing with the US, we don't have all of these trade barriers, and they feel comfortable, we're attracting capital again into our province, that's when we'll hold a successful referendum and become a sovereign nation. But I just want to thank everybody for coming out. It's just exciting to know that there's a possibility and a plan on what we need to do. I've found it the most discouraging thing for individuals and for humanity as a whole is when they can't see a road forward. And there's too many Albertans that don't see a road and a pathway forward. They just think, well, there's nothing we can do. It's our job to get out there and say, no, there's a lot that we can and we need to do. We have about 18 months or more to get that done. And this is our moment to stand up and to say no. Our moment to stand up and say it's about our freedom. It's about our future. It's about our life, our children and our grandchildren's life. And again, the exciting thing is that when you look at the numbers and the $630 billion that we've sent out east, we, as bad as our current debt is, I'm confident that we'll be able to pay it off at an accelerated rate. And again, to be that beacon of freedom to the world instead of that shame that we are right now of arresting pastors, going after businesses. It is, as Rachel used to say, oh, we're the embarrassing second cousins. Well, now we really are the embarrassing second cousins to Ottawa. And it's time, as Trudeau says, well, we're back. We're back to a deplorable situation. It's about freedom and it's about the future. And I look forward to your questions here tonight. But thanks for coming out.
Are you taking questions?
I am. And maybe we should pass this mic around so that the internet people can hear.
Okay. Danger. Can I come up?
Sure.
I like to get my face on camera. Now, my name is Mark Klimaszewski. I've been living in Alberta. I moved here. It was my home base starting in 1997. I did a lot of work down in Texas for 17 years. And having worked in Texas for the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to be a free man. Let me tell you. And this gentleman here was talking about some American pamphlets based on the American Constitution. They started off on the right foot. And we can learn a lot by reading that stuff and try to incorporate it in our future. Now, as far as our future as Alberta, I think it's very important not just to say we're going to do something politically, because if we get all the people we want, the right people in office, we still have to negotiate our way to each coast, west or east, to get our products out. I think it's absolutely important that we buy, Alberta buys a railway to Churchill and buys perhaps a railway to BC, so nobody can tell us what we can ship. We'll build and develop a port in Alberta, in Churchill, Manitoba. That way we can send our goods out there. We won't have to be stymied by Ottawa and the St. Lawrence Seaway. A number of years ago, I was looking at trying to ship oil from Thunder Bay down to the Atlantic coast on the St. Lawrence Seaway. It's an international waterway. The federal government said no.
Sir, it's question and answer. Candidate nominations open up in about 2 months, but do you have a question?
Oh,
I'm not kidding you.
I'm sorry. I just was talking.
Okay.
So my question is, will we develop a stronger vision to show the people we can get our goods out? Will we have access to the sea?
Yep.
And I think that's important too.
Nope.
Thanks for reminding.
That's a good question.
That was my question, and I apologize for talking, but I had a lot of gas built up and I had to get it out.
Well, there's a lot of Albertans with a lot of frustrations. And the nice thing about being a sovereign nation is you actually have negotiation and leverage. As a province, 1 out of 10, we have a 10% leverage, which isn't enough. And we've been showing how brutal that is. But absolutely, any of you heard of the Eagle Spirit Energy Corridor or Eagle Spirit Energy Pipeline? I mean, there's these opportunities, and we've had several opportunities in the past to get energy corridor to the actual west coast, which is close and it's open year round and beneficial. But absolutely, we'll be negotiating. And I mean, if they don't want to play ball with us, Vancouver is the biggest port in Canada. It has the largest amount of goods going back and forth. And if we can't ship our stuff out, well, I don't think they'll be able to ship their stuff in.
The problem is they go on strike all the time. That's why
Well,
it's important to have Churchill developed so we can send it out
Well,
to the Atlantic.
or Prince Rupert and develop up there.
Yeah.
But anyways, we'll do that. But this idea of being landlocked, we are as a province.
Right.
International law says that we have the ability to have access to tide water, and that'll be a top priority. And I just want to go on that. One of our top priorities will be our national security, and whether that's producing pharmaceutical, medical, we can have medical isotopes being developed in Edmonton. We can have, again, bringing up ammunition and arms manufacturing, all of those things that will be open for business. And bringing those things to Alberta so that Albertans can feel that security, that we're not dependent on China for whatever it is. Because currently, we're being led down the garden path on dependency. We're destroying more and more industry here, manufacturing, all of those innovations. You know, we had a pharmaceutical company here that applied to be able to meet some of the demands of COVID, and they were refused. Why? I believe because they want us dependent on other countries. They want to bring us to our knees, and we can't do that. You know, we've got great opportunities here to be secure with our food, to be secure militarily wise, and to be secured in all aspects of our basic needs that we have here. But no, we will not be locked up and in isolation here in Alberta as a sovereign nation.
Can I ask another question?
After the gentleman in the back, we'll go around and.
Come, you might as well come to the front and go in front of the camera, and then we don't have to repeat the question either.
Thank you very much.
Remember, it's question and answer.
It is. Don't let me forget the question. The question will be about our
Just
culture
hold
and our
that
language.
up. Hold that up to your.
I will hold that up. Put it there. As you can get it from. We've got the shakes here. My name is Jürgen Wallrath. I was born in Germany. I came to Canada in 1955 as a 6-year-old little Nazi boy that got beat up all the time. During the course of my lifetime here in Canada, my father, my mother, and I started businesses in Ottawa. In 1963, my dad started his first business called Exclusive Furniture Repair. We had contracts throughout Ottawa with the federal government, the provincial government. He made plaques for the armed forces, people who got awards, things like that. We ended up refinishing churches. We did all kinds of work. That business morphed into a company called Professional Pool Tables Limited. That company survived for 30 years. In 1994, we had a robbery where 19 people robbed our store and stole everything. The insurance companies blocked us from getting our money. Suppliers wouldn't give us any more goods. Nobody was coming in. We had nothing to sell. Basically lost the business. In my struggle with the Justice Department, 19 people got arrested. Nobody went to jail. Nobody had to pay us back. In 1981, my wife was given tainted blood through the Red Cross, through the tainted blood scandal. That blood came from Louisiana and Arkansas state prisoners. They gave her 6 units of hepatitis C infected blood. It took me 25 years to get any kind of compensation for my poor wife. She almost died. For 2 years, we watched her almost die at home while I was raising 2 kids, while my mother had Alzheimer's disease, and my store got robbed, and we lost everything. My point is, my question is this. It's not so much a question as it is a thank you to the Wild Rose Independence Party, because in my struggles and in all my work that I did in Ottawa, we're finally here in Alberta, where Dr. Ritchie at the Human Rights Institute, of which I was so proud to be a board member for almost 15 years, as I was as well a director on the Canadians for Language Fairness, where we interviewed hundreds of whistleblowers who came to us crying because they couldn't advance in the federal government, because their French wasn't good enough. So this is the thing. I've spent my life watching the Laurentian elite steal your lives, and you've kept sending them checks. And I've been sitting back east with Dr. Ritchie and all the people at the Institute wondering, where's the balls of Alberta? And I'm here to thank you, because now we finally have somebody standing up for this province and the people here, because the heart and soul of Canada is right here. I have watched them steal livelihoods for 50 years. We have to stand up now. This is it. This is the end game. There's no more sucking up to it. There's no more sitting back. And here's why I'm going to thank you, because there's no coincidence that in 1976, as that traitorous Pierre Elliott Trudeau passed over 3,300 orders in council without getting any ratification from the House of Commons. And let me tell you something. There's no coincidence that it was 1976, because it was 200 years to poke a finger in the Constitution of 1776. That's what he did. And nobody knows about it in this country.
Okay, you're good.
I'm sorry. My question is, it's a thank you for this party finally standing up for our culture and saying they want to declare English the official language, because Dr. Ritchie, Dr. Margaret E. Ritchie, look it up. All our work at the Human Rights Institute is at the University of Alberta, in the archives there, because she was afraid to leave it at the National Gallery of Canada because they would have burned all the information. Okay, thank you for declaring English as the official language of this province. It's the most important thing you can do, and those people in Ottawa, their heads will spin if you do that. They won't know what to do because you're copying Quebec. They won't know what to do. Please do it immediately. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank
you
you.
from the Institute. Thank you from Canadians for Language Fairness. Thank you for Dr. Marguerite Ritchie, who worked for almost 100 years for this country. She died in her 90s.
Thank you for your service.
I think we could take Jurgen off the undecided list. Thank you, Jurgen.
We have to do it.
What-
We have to. We can't sit here anymore.
Is there,
Well,
is there any hope
I
we
just,
can
well,
get it posted?
I just want to comment on that. Is that this is the situation where most people don't understand the abuse and what's gone on, and that's why we need to stand up. And again, too many times in our community, did we stand up for the hairdresser or for the gym or for the restaurateur? Did we stand up for those people that were being closed down? We didn't. And this fall, if it comes back, we've got to be strong and say no this time. We can't roll over and let them do it a second time to us.
I admire Jurgen's passion. I mean, we're seeing that all around the province. Like, people can hardly stand it
This is
anymore.
what we need.
That is
There's
what we need,
individuals
yes.
like that.
And same with you as well. Like, I mean, that people are coming out and they're wanting to do something. It's a matter of getting it focused, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any chance we do have a question, or is there another comment?
I was gonna follow on.
No, just like, let's just give
Well,
everybody, let's go around.
We go around before
Yeah,
we go back
yeah,
for doubles if
yeah,
there's
exactly,
another
yeah.
question, but you'll get your chance.
Go
We're not
ahead.
leaving in 5 minutes.
Go ahead.
Just, yeah, a very, very simple question. Could you give us some idea of the timetable you see going forward so that the party will be ready for 2023? What are the major milestones
Okay,
you see, and when do you think you'll hit each of those?
yeah, perfect.
Now, that's what I call a question.
Right now, and I don't keep up week to week, but I believe we have 47 CAs that are founded and operating. We need to have 87. I would love to have it by the end of the year that all the rural ridings in Calgary are done. Edmonton's a bit more of a challenge, but I would love us by the end of the year to have all 87 CAs up and running. I would really be excited and trying to push that we'll have 4 or 5 CAs that have 500 members and have actually applied because they want to have a nominated candidate and to go forward. And again, what we need there is 500 members, $5,000 in the bank, and at least one credible candidate. Then going into the spring, it's a matter of engaging Albertans and each of those CAs doing the groundwork to get the message out. You know, do we have the signs up on our lawns and in different areas in rural Alberta where you go by and you see that? Do we have enough money raised where we can put up some billboards? You know, have you had enough? Those are things that we need to do, but the real key, again, I'm going to go back and say, is each individual CA and taking the time that, you know, between now and 2023, I would love it that we have dropped off a pamphlet 3 times at every door in every riding, and that's the goal. When we've hit 3 times, we'll have a major impact. Once, it'll be good. I hope the next time when I come back that we'll actually have had 10 volunteers, that perhaps the week before that we've gone out on a blitz and we've just put the brochures in everybody's door saying that there's a Wild Rose function at the Hamptons and that we're going to have 10 times the people next time because we've actually done something to engage. It's very hard to get the passion and to get people to realize this is our last chance, folks. We can't stay in the house sleeping and thinking that things are going to eventually turn out. It's not. We're going to be smothered and we won't have a future. And so we need that passion. We need to get out there and to spread the message. But I hope that gives you a kind of a good enough
timeline and what we're trying to do.
Any other, well, I don't see any other hands up, so did you have another question?
Two short ones, very short.
I'll take your word for that. I'll hold it.
Your version,
No, we want to hear the question. Go ahead.
Once again, drawing on my experiences in Texas, I saw it was very beneficial for each community that you're talking about the police and the judiciary. The judges and the sheriffs are elected locally, and they do what the people want, not what Ottawa wants.
okay, I'll answer that one first
Yeah.
then. I appreciate the question, and the question is elected sheriffs and judges. I'm not for that. Because elections are the dirtiest, most corruptible event that we do in a democracy, and we have no idea who's been bribed, who's made what promises. And so if I know that you're running for the judge, whether I'm coming up to blackmail you or do something else, you can be compromised. But if we have elected civilian oversight, who when a judge or the police go sideways, we get rid of them. When the police come and give a ticket or arrest our pastors, we're going to be that next week, if not that day, have an emergency meeting and turfing those guys. We're about protecting individuals, not protecting the government's heavy hand
I know what
ruling
you're saying,
and
but
ruin
I'm
our
just saying
lives.
That system works very well in Texas. People are happy with it.
Well, I can appreciate that, but it's too vulnerable in my opinion, and I want elected civilian oversight. And that way, you just get an arm's length. And again, those people that we elect to govern and oversight them, those are the ones that we can recall. But sideways, but anyways.
But that's a really good question.
It is.
No, it is a good question, but what it shows is that Paul has given this a lot of thought to. Like 90% of candidates would say, well, yeah, I guess if you think it's a good idea, I probably think it's a good idea too. Yeah. Paul has thought through all this stuff. Okay. Have you got, go ahead, young fella. Everybody
Give him the mic. Give him the mic.
Yeah, I'll let you hold the mic. I'm trusting you with it. You can't ever do more than 5 minutes. Look at the camera too. Go ahead. There, you're on Facebook Live with a bunch of people watching.
I don't have so much of a question, but as this gentleman said, like democracy, there will be some
Shenanigans.
and dirt. I read military history as a hobby, and even though I'm a forklift driver and a construction laborer. Athens is where democracy was first created, and in Greece, and when Themistocles had to step forward to make his proposal about preparing for the Greco-Persian War, when Xerxes came over, he knew he needed to build a navy because they couldn't fight on land, didn't have the manpower. And when they made the proposition, when his turn came to step forward, he had to stay on topic and not deviate, or, as we commonly like to say, change the subject.
Yep.
And then after he said his piece, then everyone decided what to do, and they voted. And then that's to show how basic democracy was. And to give you an example of how it can be derailed or bribed, as you say, later on, I think it was at the end of the Peloponnesian War, I think, Socrates was sentenced to death because a lot of people didn't agree with his ideals, what he was saying. And when people voted to say let him live or let him die, many of the votes
Were bought.
I don't want to necessarily say bought, but for those who weren't educated enough to write their own name or write whether it was live or die, they were written by someone else
The other way around.
the other way around.
So do you got a question in all of that? Because I've got.
As you said, the election is for 2023. We need to work real hard. It's all or nothing. The end game, as we like to call it. Just to give you an example of corruption.
No, we need a question. No,
We need a question.
We can talk about example of corruption until 2023. But if you've got a question, great, ask one. Otherwise, you've made a really good point. But,
And I have a comment already, or an answer that you haven't asked the question yet, but I have an answer.
See, that's how smart he is. He's got an
Well,
answer
no,
to a question.
no,
I don't.
but what he's,
We know where he's
but
going.
what he's talking about is are our elections secure? We've seen what's happened in the States. We know what Trudeau's trying to do. What you need is a traceable paper ballot, and then it needs to be in one day. And you have scrutineers that get to actually sit there and to watch. You look in the ballot box at the start. Your scrutineers for all the different parties can be watching. And again, the people have to show their identification. But a secret ballot is critical. And to be able to have scrutineers there to watch from the start to the finish. None of this idea that the box is going into safekeeping overnight and coming back for the next day. There's lots of ways of manipulating elections, and we need to have safe, secure, traceable elections with a paper ballot. But anyways.
Do you have any suggestions, in addition to the ballots, as you said, for the polling stations when they're open and closed? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that we'll have set times, that it's like from 8 until 8, and again, you can be there in the presence the entire time. There's none of this idea, oh, we're going to lock down for lunch, and we'll leave the box here secure. None of that. No, your scrutineers have to have full access, visual sight at all times, be able to see people come and know that they're presenting valid ID.
I'm asking because my uncle and I watched the election in October of 2019, and they announced it on the screen while we were watching that the polling stations in Ottawa got to stay open for an extra hour or two. That's not fair to the rest of the country.
Well, I realize that, but if people have been lined up, generally historically, if people are lined up before closing time, they accommodate those people. They kind of close the line off and say you're going in there. So I don't know the situation in 2019, but we would certainly not, if people are lined up in there, to me they have the right to vote, and they're not going to be denied that right because the clock strikes 8 or whatever time. But you can't be showing up the next morning or 2 hours later knocking on the door. That there'll be a set time, people present will get to vote. We can't change that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I certainly admire someone who's taken the time to study like Greek history. One of my favorite quotes is Pericles, and he said, when you look out over this great country that we all love, remember that it was built by men and women who knew their duty and had the courage to do it. So clearly, you all know your duty or you wouldn't be here tonight. I guess the question we're going to decide sometime in the next few months is whether we all have the courage to do it. Sir, it's your turn.
You can hold the mic.
Okay.
Okay. Is he going to be the speaker and he'll shut it off on us, Loar? That's what the speaker would do to me. So.
It'll be real short.
Okay.
In regards to the Canada Pension Plan and the Alberta Pension Plan that you're talking
Yep.
about,
Yep.
would Alberta be able to get their share of the Canada Pension Plan brought back to us?
We will fight to negotiate that, but I don't expect anything back from Ottawa, but they won't be getting a red dime for us, and so we'll have, I guess I want to say the bird in the hand as opposed to them, but no, the $630 billion, when they want to say that, you know, we owe 10% of their $1 trillion debt, we'll say, okay, well, 10% of that's $100 billion, you still owe us $500 billion. Like we're so far into the positive on this, we'll be doing some negotiation, but I don't expect anything from them, and it'll be phony money if they do send it, probably.
Rick, could you give that fellow two of those Wild Rose prizes that we had for the guy who asked the first question? Anyway, Gary, go ahead.
We also will have then access to the pipeline, that the Kinder Morgan pipeline that Ottawa now owns.
Well, again, when you say will we have access, we will negotiate.
Repeat the question just for the.
Oh,
yeah, just for the Facebook.
I guess I got a mic here. Will we have access to the Kinder Morgan or the Trans Mountain pipeline? We might have to negotiate and fight, but I see no reason why we won't have more right-of-ways and more opportunities. They're going to bite the hand that feeds them in a big way. I mean, I love justice and a just society. And I look at that and say, well, what makes for a just and peaceful society? It's because the punishment is usually greater than the reward of getting that. And I often use the example, how many burglars and thieves would we have if every time we caught them, they just had to pay back 10% of what they took?
which Yerman is talking about here. No, the reason is that they have to do time and make compensation. And again, the law is set up such, and again, our legal system isn't, but the perpetrator should be held responsible for what he's done, and the victim should be compensated for what they lost plus. We should be in a better situation. And that's what I see in a peaceful, prosperous Alberta with a justice system that is actually protecting the individuals' lives, the freedom, and their property, and those individuals having the right to protect their own lives, freedoms, and property. And we don't have that. But is that we'll be able to negotiate those things in good faith? And as the one gentleman says, is that maybe we'll be buying some of those right of ways. And
that pipeline is worth more to Albertans than our money that we have in the pension plan in Ottawa.
Well, I would argue it's the Northern Gateway that we need, or we need to work. I mean, with Kelvin and Helen, and the Indigenous people of BC have done a lot of work, and they're anxious to do a deal with Alberta, and we can do it. I just see that we just need someone who has the desire to do it. Jason Kenney took Kelvin around campaigning with him, talked about working with the Indigenous people, and for whatever reason, the day after he was elected, he dropped him like a hot potato, like so many other of his promises. But it's been disappointing. I've seen it 3 times when I was up there in the legislature that we've had opportunities to get pipelines, and even our provincial people have let the ball drop. Alison Redford, there was a group when they did a request for proposal for the last upgrader. There was a group of Indigenous bands and individuals that had a proposal, and they had partners from India and financing, and it wasn't even looked at. And Alison Redford went and says, "Oh, we're sticking with Total," her French connections in the UN. But there's just been so much corruption in all of those areas. An actual just society that respects the rule of law and recognizes the supremacy of God. This will be the beacon for capital around the world. I mean, when you look at those tax jurisdictions where money's being attracted to and all they have is tax laws, we have the people, we have the resources. We just have so much here to attract capital and the entrepreneur. The sky's the limit, in my opinion, on what our GDP can become and where we'll be in a short period of time.
Certainly, to me, lack of access isn't for a lack of ideas. It's for a lack of leadership. And I mean, what Paul is talking about is taking leadership. There's all kinds of things that you can do to secure access, but you have to have the guts to do it. It's just like asking the Auditor General what he'd like to work for. You have to make a deal. You can't just say, well, that's the way you do it. So anyway, sir, your turn.
The question that'll help me understand and
Just
go,
go up here and look at the camera. No, that's fine.
and to go to feel more comfortable to really push this idea of what we have to do here. A simple bunch of numbers for me to relay to people that question me on, oh, we can't separate, we'd be really done then. What does Alberta, like, roughly contribute in income tax, taxes like the EI payments and
GST,
pension payments, what is
yep.
kind of a rough number that we can say, hey, here's what we would have if we quit sending money and getting robbed?
No, excellent question. I'm no economist. The numbers that I've read, they're not verified, but we average $50 billion a year of revenue being sent to Ottawa. Ottawa claims to give us $30 billion in services, which again, I think we can do it at $15 billion, what they offer at 30. But that leaves a net $20 billion that the Alberta industry, labor, and individuals have sent to Ottawa that we don't get back. When we start collecting all those taxes, we're already plus $20 billion. And then again, those services and so-called federal programs, I don't see those costing us $15 billion. So now we're all of a sudden $35 billion positive for our GDP and what we're doing. And that's just exciting, not to even talk about the rules and the regulations and all of the federal oversights. Just we're regulated and taxed to death. We can get rid of both of those shackles, just throw them off, and we're a free nation that we, like I say,
most of this,
sky's the limit.
Most of this stuff is half labor and half cost. So in that $30 billion of services they provide for us, even if you assume that it's half cost, you have to pay your dues, here, there, whatever, the border security, one thing or other. It's still 15 billion in labor. So if you brought all that labor home here, it would be a $15 billion mega project every year. And the people would be living in Medicine Hat and Whiteminster and Red Deer.
And they get to speak English.
And they get to speak English, yes, exactly. Paul and I and Rick were all candidates, Wild Rose candidates in 2012, and they said, well, what about the cost of this? And they said, like, bilingualism, like, adds probably, I don't know the number, 20 to 30% to the cost of everything.
I was going to say, 20 years ago, it was calculated out that the $600 billion national debt that we had was equivalent to what they'd spent on bilingualism. Don't know if that's verified, but
May I verify that?
shortly.
We had an accountant in 2001 work for us for Canadians for Language Fairness, and he had estimated at that time Canada had already spent over $1 trillion on bilingualism. That's to the federal government and to all the private industries that bought into the lie that we're a bilingual country.
Yeah.
That's $1 trillion. $1 trillion.
Give him a button too. His questions are getting shorter. Give him a button too. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead. Well, I've got one at the back and then I'll get back. Go ahead.
Just a short question about the border. Without border control, like I get a lot of feedback about for landlocked. Well, Eastern Canada is landlocked from all the imports from the Asian countries.
Correct.
Without going through Alberta, there's nothing on those Costco shelves in Ontario. So are we prepared? You know, we're talking about our own police force and the military, and you have to be hard about that to get respect.
We'll be 100% iron fist on the table, and if we have to back up trucks and trains and everything else for 6 months because we're verifying that it's rat-free, we'll do that.
Don't worry about securing our borders. We're the only rat-free nation in the world. Like, we know how to do it. So, go ahead.
A question on how do you intend, when you're at the final stage, is there a general strategy at this time of how you intend to sell the idea of sovereignty, the actual separation? I mean, if you think about it, the more measures you take to put Alberta in charge, the less the reason to leave.
Well, that's an excellent question, but I think I have an excellent answer. All that put aside, if your business partner is a drunk, an addict, a gambler, and everything else.
How do you know where I work?
We have the people. Would you stay with that partner, or when you have your separate bank account, your own police, everything else, you would move on? Just the $1 trillion debt that they have today federally, we cannot afford to pay off as Albertans, and you just can't stay in a family that has this idea that you have tyranny of the majority, and that it'll be a constant battle. And if you don't declare it and take those steps, you will lose it again. It's like cancer, and you need to make the clean cut. And like I say, it's when Albertans see the freedom and the prosperity that we have when we exercise our powers and our autonomy, I'm just very confident that we'll have a 70% plus support in wanting to be a sovereign nation.
What about currency? Do we have our own money?
Well, I think that we'll have to have our own national bank, but again, when you look around the world right now and all the, I want to say fiat money, how would we choose today what we're going to do then? But a sovereign nation, we need to look at setting up our own financial system and all of those things that go along with.
So that's in other words.
Yep.
We've got one here, and then I'll get back to you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, Paul, just in terms of Saskatchewan, would you be prepared to add Saskatchewan to the independence?
Well, I wouldn't add them, I'd join them, or they can join us. I truly believe that this will be a domino effect, and I see northern BC telling the lower mainland that, you know what, you can live your little island of dream, but we're reality based, and I actually believe that we can get the territories, the Yukon and the Northwest, and I see, like I say, the sky's the limit, the opportunities to go forward, as opposed to the ball and chain of Ottawa and their control over everybody's individual lives and their their future. But no, we just need someone to step forward. And that's what Albertans are great at, stepping forward and taking and having the courage to do what needs to be done.
In the back, go ahead, your turn.
Yes. I guess in regards to currency, we could help Ralph Bucks.
He says in regards to currency, we could have Ralph Bucks. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Norway and with the Alaska Fund. I see, and again, it's been my goal since way back in the 2000s that the Heritage Fund should have been built up to the position where the interest would have surpassed the revenue that we got from oil and gas. But it's just been squandered. It's just like this last year, federally and provincially. We have spent tens of billions and they hundreds of billions of dollars. And do we have anything to show for it besides the red book? No, we have a debt to show that we owe this. This is equivalent to a dog who's starving chasing its tail for food. We've gone nowhere and we have nothing to show for it. I mean, there's no reason why we didn't have 2 more hospitals built, why we didn't have more nurses being graduated and respiratory therapists. And there's so many things that we could have spent $20 billion on instead of PCR tests and tracing people and you know, all the other ridiculous things that they've spent it on.
Getting to that point, what you just said, we have family members that work in a medical, that are in nurses and things like that. They are told to shut up now, right? We're in a situation where our nurses, or our family members that are nurses and caregivers are told to shut up. They can't say what's being happened.
I got to intervene. It's not told to shut up. They're saying if you speak up, that you'll lose your ability to practice. I mean, I've talked to doctors. I mean, Dr. Roger Hodkinson, I mean, he's being pulled forward before the College of Physicians. It's unbelievable to me the attack that the individuals have had, and again, in all the professions. It's just vicious. And again, we look at Bill C-10. We look down in the States. I have to be careful on what we say here on YouTube and on Twitter, and what would I say? Keep within their censorship, because if we go against the narrative, that they pull our plug. And it's difficult, but no, this censorship is just absolutely wrong, and we've got to continue to fight it.
Go ahead.
On that note of healthcare, are we looking towards like an American approach or still a Commonwealth?
The question is on healthcare. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Our system right now is upside down and backwards. Central government doesn't work in anything. We need to go back to where a hospital has a hospital administrator, where they're making the choices. We need to change from what we call global funding right now. Right now they look at a hospital and they look at how many beds are there, how many employees are there, what all they're providing for services, and then they come up with a global fund and say, okay, well, this hospital, we're going to give them $2 billion. And then they break it down and, okay, we'll do this much for brain surgery, this much for that, and they portion it all out. And then they break it down. That's why we have wait times and can't get in, is because they already have allotted funds and how many operations they're going to do, how many MRIs. It's all measured out. But if we switch to where you actually have a business, the hospital, who gets paid because someone came in and needs an X-ray, all of a sudden efficiency kicks in, and the hospital administrator will say, wow, we have a real problem with asthma here because of this and that, and they'll beef up that area and actually start to meet the needs of the customer who's coming through. But right now there's no incentive. I mean, I'm always just amazed at the one simple system where we have paramedics who show up at the hospital, they go off shift, and they come back, and that same patient is waiting to be admitted into a hospital. Like who comes up with these ideas?
With their colleagues with them, sitting
Well,
with them.
well yeah, no, that's what I say. You're not allowed. They're not allowed to. When somebody gets to the hospital door and they're there, it's going to be the hospital's responsibility to take care of those individuals. They're not going to offload it to paramedics, but that's just one gross example of the incompetence and just the ridiculousness of our system. We need to change it so that the hospitals are getting paid to provide services to us. And I, again, see great leaps forward rapidly. And again, like for 20 years, they've talked that, do you know what the biggest problem with our hospitals are? They call them bed blockers. Do you know what that is? These are seniors and people who can't look after themselves, but they have no place to go. I mean, we've talked about for 20 years building more senior care facilities. We just spent $20 billion on what? How many senior care facilities and senior care workers could we hire for that and open up our hospitals? I mean, when you look at a lot of this stuff, you shake your head and you say, this is unbelievable. This can't be true. There's got to be something else. And there isn't. It's just pure incompetence and no responsibility. They pass the buck.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that though, I think the question was, will the healthcare system be universal or will there be a mix of American?
Yeah.
And we look at
Yeah.
any private
So,
city
yep.
universal
Sorry. So you asked, will it be universal or will it be a mix? For me, we'll be a free nation and a free market. We will have our healthcare system that exists now. We'll fix that. But any doctor or anybody who wants to set up office and offer, for example, hip and knees, they're a long wait. How many people do we have leaving Canada to go and get surgery? Any doctor, anybody else who can set up and wants to be here, we will be open for what do you call that? Third-party delivery of areas where we're short on and not meeting the needs. There's no reason for Canadians, in my opinion, to be leaving to receiving treatment other places in the world. Those doctors can come up here, set up shop, and do that. But I hope to accelerate, like I say, and meet the needs of Canadians with our current system. But absolutely will be an open free market. And if there's no reason why we can't actually set up what they call medical tourism. And this could be a destination where people come from around the world to actually come to Alberta to get the best treatment that's available.
Just while we're talking about healthcare, Paul and I are chairman and co-chairman of the Economic Education Association. We've had 9 what we call them Essential of Freedom conferences, and our next Essentials of Freedom conference is going to be October 22nd, 23rd. We haven't got the venue yet, but it's called Meeting the Healthcare Challenge. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Is like I said, the first challenge that Meeting the Healthcare Challenge has to face is how do we keep from going broke doing it? You know what I mean? But we're going to be, if you'd like to mark your calendar for the 22nd and 23rd, I think it's going to be like a leading conversation on what all these options are. And the second thing, just while I'm still speaking, you'll be taking the mic away from me again in a minute. But in any event, you mentioned when you were talking about recall, you said if you get 5,000 votes, well then you can recall your MLA. That's actually his Lloydminster story, because your policy is actually 50% plus one of the people who voted, and in Lloydminster 10,000 people voted. So if you get 5,000 plus one, then you can recall that candidate and force a by-election. But in some of these ridings that are a little bit bigger, where
it'll be 50% plus one.
Yes.
I just use that as I ran personally,
yes,
because that was what the voting was.
Right, yeah.
But no, it'd be 50%
yeah,
plus one, and again over a minimum of at least 4 months, and none of this idea that if you attempted once and failed that you can't make a second attempt. But Premier Kenney's bill on recall is just an insult to any intelligent Albertan. And for him to say that he promise made, promise kept, just another total disgusting verbal diarrhea that I'm sorry, there's no credibility in your talk.
Only the easy one.
There's none that are easy when you got to get 40% of the registered voters. Oh. Oh, please list them off. It should be easy. I don't know of any. What's that? Okay, well, that's 5 more than I'm aware of, so we'll talk afterwards. So,
we've got 2 more questions right here, and then you go ahead.
I read some of the material, which I was all very impressed with, for the party, the founding documents. And could you address and talk a bit about the idea of the Alberta Labour Corps?
you need to expand a little bit more on that.
Well, the Alberta Labour Corps was a substitute for welfare.
Oh, okay. Two aspects on that I want to go with. One of the other problems with our judicial system, and sorry to go off on a segue, is that we need rehabilitation facilities. And this idea that someone, if they're going to prison, they need to be in a rehab center where they're actually working and doing something. I think one of the most important things for individuals and self-worth is to actually have a job. And for someone to go and to get something for nothing, it's humiliating. And many people don't want to do it. And again, once you've got on that train, well, that humility's kind of left. But I think that there's things that we can offer and give people who need support, that we can give that there and have jobs available for those individuals to do things. If that kind of answers your question, or but that feeling of self-worth and part of society is critical. And when people are getting something for nothing, like I say, it's not good for those individuals.
Go ahead.
As you said, it's going to be a pile of stepping stones to get from where we are now until we actually do something. Is the Wild Rose Party prepared when they feel it's most advantageous to seek recognition from foreign countries after we have something?
We'll be doing that the day after we're elected. We'll be having representatives going and talking to our trade partners. One of the exciting things also about Alberta is we have no industries that we need to protect here. All of the industries that are protected are out east. It's for Easterners' benefit. And we actually are more than happy to have free trade with other jurisdictions that are democratic and have the free market. I don't consider China one of those. North Korea and Venezuela and many other ones, but no, we have a great opportunity to go around, be recognized, and we'll be doing that the day after we form government, to be setting up those trade relations and again, to bring down those trade barriers. And thanks for the question. Oh, sorry, Laura.
What's the stance on supply management?
Supply management was the question. You know, I always marvel when I come into any town, any city, and you go into the industrial area and all of those. The free market is the answer. Anytime that somebody says that, oh, this is critical and we need to have government manage it, I'm sorry, it just creates problems. And again, it sets up monopolies or oligopolies, and again, the people pay a premium price for a protected product, and we just don't need to do that. We're a competitive, hard-working society, and innovative, and they'll do just fine. We don't need to be protecting any of our markets.
All right, well, I just need to make a comment regarding
Okay.
the supply management and the milk.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yep.
that's part of the supply management process?
Absolutely. It's the biggest one here in Alberta, I would assume.
Right, and you're aware that the US government supplies somewhere like $10 billion into the milk industry there. They buy it and sell it cheap, and that's something that they go to the store, and that's their sale.
Well, and that's why I said so long as it's a free market and competitive. I mean, if a government is subsidizing something, that's a whole different determination. And we're not going to allow subsidized products to come into our country without some tariffs or taxes. But yeah, that.
Gary.
My answer to that is, if the Americans can produce milk in Louisiana, bottle it, and ship it all the way to Alberta and undercut us, our dairy farmers are missing the boat. And I don't think that's the case. I think the problem is the government has their feet in it. And that's the reason why
The U.S. government subsidizes all kinds of agriculture.
$10 billion worth.
Is that all? I was going to say I'd look it up, but it's
Yeah,
huge.
actually, I've looked it up.
Is that just for dairy, or is that agriculture is all entirely?
Oh, yeah. There's
Yeah,
billions,
yeah. Like when you look at ethanol, I mean it just goes on and on and on. That it's a heavily lobbied big business in the U.S.
But our government quotas are one of our problems with our dairy system, because if you got a quota of 1,000 gallons a day and you produce 1,500, you can't regulate a cow. A cow regulates itself. You throw 500 out. There's the problem.
Well, you need to expand on that a little bit. What's like, you mean just because we have quotas, or I'm not sure what you mean's the problem?
The cost, you still incur the cost of 1,500, but you can only sell 1,000. If you can sell the whole 1,500,
Well, that goes back.
the cost would come down.
Yeah.
If the costs come down, the Americans can't afford to bring their stuff up here.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to market supply and demand. I mean, let's just look at what happened with lumber. Everybody says that the best solution for high prices is always high prices. I mean, the lumber industry thought, wow, this is heaven. We're getting $9 for a 2x4. Well, it wasn't too long before, oh, we're not selling any 2x4s at $9. And it backs up and it comes back to reality. But as soon as the government jumps in, and if we were to say, oh, you can't do that, we got to regulate that, and we're only going to allow you to charge $8.95, that last nickel is breaking the camel's back. I mean, government's got to learn to I love the coin of Adam Smith, the invisible hand. And I say to people all the time, if you think the market and the invisible hand is too hard on individuals, wait till you see the impact of the heavy hand of government. It knocks the head right off the producer. And so no, yes, there's pain and it goes up and it's down, but it hits the medium much quicker when you allow the free market to decide that, as opposed to government coming in and making some drastic changes and saying, oh, this is unacceptable, we can't have these kind of lumber prices. There was a shortage. It went up.
Sure, go ahead. I was gonna make one comment on the forest firefighting.
I'm holding the mic. Go ahead.
One of the problems with water bombers fighting our forest fires is that they take contracts. And if they get a bunch of contracts to fight fires in Quebec, they're not here available to fight fires in Alberta or BC or wherever. Now, I know you don't like the idea of big gun, but I think it would be a good idea to investigate establishing a sort of water bomber force that we could have, that we own as Alberta, and we could always sell it out and market it out if we're not using it. But we should have our own water bombers to knock down big forest fires. Like I saw these old Boeing flying boats that can drop 40,000 gallons of water. That knocks down a fire. Not, 50 helicopters with a cubic meter of water. And when they come down to a fire, their bloody blades fan the damn flames. If you had something like that, a dedicated water bomber force, I think would be a good thing.
Well, it's an excellent question, but again, I'm going to make a couple of my own experiences on that. First of all, we're very limited in the number of places where those big water bombers can fill up. You go to Manitoba and other places, but they take a big lake, big runway, and they can't just operate everywhere. But I would actually argue, if you go back a few years, it's like snow removal. Do we need to do all of that, or do you contract out and have private enterprise meets that? But the reason why we lost... Well, but again, if you contract because we want that, you can actually contract and have those in. We don't need to own them to have competitive business and people who want to be there. And if we need more, then we contract more.
Yeah, but there's not enough planes out
there.
But
why would we want government to own and run them? It just becomes a boondoggle.
Have them if we have a fire.
If we have a contract with a company to produce those and have them there, we have them.
Oh yeah, sure.
And that's what I'm saying. We just need to open up competitive bidding. And if we want 40, then we bid on 40.
Okay.
If we want 20, we bid on 20.
Okay.
But again, we need to realize that we just can't have water bombers throughout Alberta because there's only so far that they can travel, and to do that, and we're limited, especially here in southern Alberta, on where they can actually fill up and go there. And we also have the problem of different waterways contaminating, that we have different diseases in them, and we can't pick up water in this one and bring it over to a fire here and end up in the stream, and then we got a new disease in there. So there's a lot of mitigation in there, but we will do a lot better on our firefighting than the current government has.
I'm tired of choking.
No, as I say, we put out the contracts to meet what we feel we need.
Rick and I both have a friend in the aerial spraying business who bid on a government contract, and he ended up being the low bidder by about $1 million a year over on a 3-year deal. But they denied him because his airplanes were 1,040 liters delivery, and the contract said it had to be 1,050 or more. You know what I mean? And so his answer to that was just let it deliver. Let us deliver the water or the spray in this case for so many dollars
per liter
or liter or whatever. And there's all kinds of outfits that could deliver small amounts of water at a certain amount. So you wouldn't have to own all the planes either.
Well, no, that's what I say. You'd contract them out.
Absolutely,
and again, but I want to say also, one of the big problems that we have is this collusion with industry, or this idea. It's just unbelievable, the parameters that they put around a lot of these bids. And that's a classic one, is that this company Their bomber is only 1,040 liters. This one, 1,070. You just put in there, oh, it's got to be 1,050 or more. 90% of the people aren't aware, but we need open, honest, transparent, competitive bidding. And anything short of that, you know there's shenanigans going on. And again, it goes back to, like you say, the per unit delivery, not the other one. I'll go through another story. The Edmonton Airport. How many of you ever flown into the old Edmonton Airport downtown? Do you know how that got closed down? Just one step at a time. I went up there and I was fighting back in 2004, 2005 that this is geographic discrimination. They told all the North people that you could keep flying in, but we can't let Southern Alberta. They got to stop at Leduc. And those people would not stand up for us. And I says, you guys are next. Oh no, we're safe. They've told us they're going to keep us open. And this is where we need to learn to protect other people's freedoms. This idea of just protecting our own isn't good enough. It's about protecting and respecting other people's freedoms. And we continue to lose that. But that's what good government is about, is protecting all those freedoms, having open and fair competitive bidding. There's so many things that we can and will do as an open, honest government that's there to serve the people, not have a bunch of serfs that we're taxing and controlling on what they can and can't do 7 days a week.
And the recall is there, so they're not happy. Right.
100%.
Did you have another question?
You just hit on a very touchy point for me, and that is, I remember the medical schmozzle with the super board.
Oh.
And I can't remember where the fellow came.
Duckett, Stephen Duckett?
Is that the fellow that came in from
The
Australia?
cookie man?
Yeah.
Yes.
And, as far as fairness and openness goes, the way I look at it, once you sign a contract with someone, if it's public money, the contract and the compensation package should be published.
Yep.
People should know.
Yep. No, I agree. I just want to refer to Stephen Duckett for a minute. I was actually excited when he got fired because I knew he had a year left of his contract. And what he was a medical accountant and assessor. And I thought, wow, for a whole year, we can have him go around to every hospital and analyze it and say, wow, this hospital's doing MRIs for $1,400. This one down here is doing it for $700. And he could have gone through with a fine-tooth comb and figured out all of the problems that we had. Instead, we sent him home with his money. We should have kept him working for a year, actually doing something productive. But again, central government, central decisions, behind closed doors, and the negotiations, it's just unbelievable. The compensation packages and things that are negotiated. And again, we want to respect the rule of law. And when you have a contract, we need to respect that contract. And the government doesn't do it. It's notorious. And again, the most classic one right now is that they've removed the responsibility of the drug companies for these vaccinations. Is that no, there'll be no liability. Thank you. The liability issue's been wavered. Who does that? Government. It's wrong.
We had a lady on our local, she was a local hospital, you know where Elma, like she was, anyway, when they privatized the laundry, she set up a meeting, she wanted to talk to the head guy in charge of laundry. So they got the meeting, she said, well, like, how much a sheet did it cost to wash the sheets in Vermilion before you closed it and sold the washing machine? And how much a sheet does it cost to wash the sheets with your centralized delivery? He said, well, I don't know, like, what difference does that make? He said, like, there's a saving when you do it in one place. I said, well, how do you know there's a saving if you don't know what it costs to do it, and you don't know what it costs to do it now? Like, some of this stuff is insane. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. There's so many healthcare stories that we could go on all night. You know, they just to get the approval to buy some bleach is unbelievable. If, again, central supply, they don't send enough, you can't go out and get your own. It's just unbelievable.
Go ahead.
When you mentioned about those costs, and I was hoping that maybe you'd have an answer for this or be able to help us address it. They said Canada has the most expensive dental costs, basically, anywhere in the world.
Wasn't aware of that, but okay.
Alberta has the highest dental costs in Canada. And how is this all connected, or is this, I keep thinking, because we've been milked dry so often, like a lot of people maybe have to charge more for it, but when you were talking about justifying some costs, I wonder if there's anything.
you have any ideas on
Well, I'm going to say that the best solution for all of these things is just the open, free, competitive market. And you let, if a dentist wants to come in and he's young and eager and needs to get business and he wants to drop the price, he should be able to do that. And they shouldn't be able to collude and say, oh no, it's this much for that and this much for whatever else. We need an open, competitive market. Colluding is not supposed to be allowed in our country.
Go ahead.
When are we gonna get party cards? I want to be a member of the party.
Well, if you want to print something, you're welcome to. We've actually talked about it. David, do you have any answers on that? Like, we're not going to be sending out any parties. Anything in the mail is too expensive, and who wants to support Canada Post? I mean, but we will possibly.
When we have our Alberta Postal Company, then we'll support it.
David, do you want to say something?
Yeah, okay, so, I'm David. I go around with Paul, and I'm on the communications committee, and there's some really cool stuff coming. One of the things is a website for members. You can sign in, and on there, we're gonna try to have something that has a membership card that you can offer yourself and have a number. So that should be live on the 30th.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it at the end. You know, it just. Yeah, but thank you. But yeah, we'll hopefully have some sort of nice fancy card if you want to print it off. My wallet's already too thick, and I don't want another card. But
Go ahead.
I heard talk of the Constitution, and I'm wondering, is there going to be like the U.S. Constitution, the Second Amendment, for firearm owners because they are now being criminalized in our country? That's because, like, will there be legal, carry? That, like the gentleman talked about that in Texas. I worked in Texas too for a while, and you can legally carry down there where you can't here in Canada.
Yep.
That's number one. Number two is, I know that there's the 70% vote get out of Canada rule. However, I believe we're a cash cow to Ottawa, and I don't think it's going to be that easy. And if it isn't, and it comes down to it, is the Wild Rose Party willing to take that next step?
absolutely, absolutely. But to answer your Constitution, just so happens I have this little piece of paper here, and it says on here the Constitution Act 1867, 1982. This to me is the problem of our country. It allows for divide and conquer. It allows for tyranny of the majority. It allows, and it just, demonstrably justified. We can lose our freedoms. That needs to go. We absolutely, our foundation will be a constitution that absolutely 100% guarantees your life, your freedom, and your property. And that life starts, or that, and that first and most critical piece of property that we each own is our body. And that needs to be protected from government intrusion and saying what you have and can and can't do. And again, like I say, the proper role of government is to protect those and not say, oh, for the good of society, that everybody who's over 75 in here has to go. We're short of food and we're getting rid of you. But that's what our current Constitution allows, for the divide and conquer. There is nothing protected in there that government can't actually use its heavy hand to reach out and to grab or to choke or to destroy. And that's not beneficial for society as a whole. And we see I want to say the chaos and the problems that we have. And so we'll have a constitutional conference. We absolutely, again, our rights, our inalienable rights of life, liberty, property, and our ability to defend that are ours. And we actually hand those over to the government to collectively protect us. And so that's paramount that we have that. And so you can't lose those rights, and then the government now has those rights and we don't have them. And so the right to own and bear arms, I absolutely agree, needs to be constitutional in there and allow people to have that right to defend themselves, and not have a justice minister or premier who says, oh, I want to give you a new tool here. And as again, I can't remember who talked about it now, but now you can use pepper spray to defend yourself. They don't have the right to decide how we do that. And again, if a perpetrator enters your home at night, right now the biggest thing that I would fear if somebody broke into my house is what the law is going to do to me after I've defended my family and my property and things. And that's wrong. We shouldn't be worried about that. And if somebody comes in and breaks into your home, you don't need to go through a questionnaire and have them sign, say, I'd like to know your intent, sir. You just want my TV? You want some cash? Is my daughter safe? Like it's ridiculous right now where we have to make a judgment on how much force or what they're going to do so that we have the proper and appropriate response to that individual. I mean, I just can't believe the individuals that put these things together and think that somehow they're protecting society. But hope that answers your question. But the right to own and bear arms needs to be in our Constitution.
You mentioned the 70% rule, and that's sort of a popular misconception. You want to comment on that?
No, go ahead.
That's a popular misconception. If you want to change the Constitution, 70% of the people have to vote on it. But what we're talking about with independence is the Clarity Act. And the Clarity Act is if a province wants to have a clear question on the issue, 50% plus one have to vote to do it. So we're talking apples and oranges here. And if you want to change the Constitution, then you need 70% and 7%. 7 provinces or whatever, 5 provinces. But just leaving, it's the Clarity Act, 50% plus 1, you can leave if you want to.
I think it's actually 50% in 7 provinces.
Yes, 50%.
Yes, for Constitution.
Change the Constitution.
Yeah. But again, we're not going to be asking for permission. We'll actually just be doing it. When we have our own police force, when we have our own taxes, we have all of that. We will be independent. And then it's a formality after that.
Yeah, sure.
Perhaps a comment.
Oh, here we go.
We've never had any of those.
I agree with just, if we can do it, we can leave. But I think there's a lot of people here very sentimentally connected to, Canada. And I think one of the best ways to sell us as an independent nation is that we initially say we are going to leave and remain as a constitutional monarchy for a given amount of time. Because the advantage there is we don't have to change any of our laws. It all is based upon Crown authority. And so it's literally just an instantaneous shift, and we don't have to worry about the fact that we've made all our laws illegal.
Yeah. No, that's our intention at this point. That's one of the steps. And so 100%.
Now here's the funny odd circumstance. I used to work up at the big base in Suffield, which is a huge base and happens to be federal property. So when Alberta leaves, there's going to be this big hole in it, which technically is still part of Canada.
It's inside our boundaries.
So that is something you're going to have to explore so that doesn't become a problem.
They'll need a passport to get to it.
Yeah.
I just raised that.
There's a lot of federally declared land in here. And again, whether you want to say we buy that off and say, well, that's $600 billion, there's another $100 billion to buy this or whatever. But it's inside our boundaries. But we've gone on long. I'm happy to stay longer, but we've got a special guest that showed up here tonight. He was at a meeting earlier, but Drew Barnes, the MLA for this area, I have a world of respect for Drew. I've known him for a long time. He's principled, and he just wanted to give a thank you, and we'll...
Okay. Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Danny. First of all, it's so nice to be in a room tonight where I can tell how much each and every person in here cares about Alberta, cares about our families, our communities. I'm so pleased to be in a room where we care about value for dollars when it comes to our programs, when we care about choice in health and education, when we care about how things work. I'm especially glad to thank Paul Hinman tonight and Alberta Champion. When I showed up in 2011 as a wet behind the ears rookie to run with Rick Strikeman, same thing, to run for the Wild Rose. The leadership that Paul helped show me, any questions I had, Paul was always available. I could always count on his conservative, his family, his fiscal conservative beliefs anytime I needed him. And Paul, I'm so glad that you've been a champion for our values, for our communities, and for our families since 2002 when this came. You were so much there for me from 2011 to even today. I know when I need something from Paul, I can get it. So God bless you for that, and thank you for that. And Paul's a champion tonight. I just came from a meeting where the Alberta Finance Minister was there, and I think you outdrew him 2-1.
I'll say money can't buy every Albertan.
In this room, anyway. So I just want to close with some of the things that are important. You know, I left a room where I'm hearing about a $17 billion annual deficit. My God. For our economy and for our children, at a time, we all know the forestry, agriculture, and commodity wealth we have. But every day we're reminded, in our fight for a fair deal with Alberta, in our fight for prioritizing Alberta, how much we need people like Paul and how much we need the Wild Rose Independence Party, Danny Hozak, to make this happen. It's over 20 years ago since Stephen Harper, Ken Buzikal, Ted Morton said the Alberta agenda items. We need to collect our own taxes, take control of our own immigration, have our own pension plan, have our own police force, to gain some leverage with Ottawa, so we stop sending $25+ billion a year. $670 billion has left Alberta since 1960 and helped supported the rest of Canada in a way that hasn't been good for them. That's over 20 years. And just a year and a half ago, I was on the Fair Deal panel. And that, of course, as we know, was shuffled under the rug. When I said, this isn't what thousands of Albertans told me at meetings around the province, my reward for that was being kicked out of caucus 8 or 9 weeks ago.
We've got a caucus that's waiting for you.
There you go. Well, thank you. And you know, and yesterday, my colleague Todd Lowen from Central Peace Notley, who also got kicked out he got to the level of frustration where he was so frustrated with the government not listening to Albertans, with a premier who said, hey, I'm in a blue truck, I'm a members-driven guy, who was absolutely the opposite of that he demanded and called for his resignation, and his reward was being kicked out. And yesterday, it was politics as usual. Todd, there was a meeting at the Valley View Hospital in Todd's constituency, something to do with making programs work better. Todd went there with the health minister, and they denied him access.
Oh, serious?
Serious. In his own jurisdiction, representing his 50,000 voters, a hard-working, respectful, conservative family community guy, the UCP government denied him access. Just like we used to see years ago.
And did he listen to them?
He did, but that is...
He got what he deserves.
But it's part of the fight, and it's one of the reasons that I'm so grateful to see so many people here, so many people that feel the same way. And you know, and the fight for the fair deal with Ottawa, and you know, independence if necessary. What I'm hearing today is about Montana trucks getting paid to take our feed down to America, putting one of the hard things in our cattle industry again. I heard yesterday about how the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which is now owned by the Conservative or the Liberal Party of Canada, really Canadian, isn't even moving, isn't even progressing.
Of course.
Yeah. You know, again, guys, I'm so grateful that we have Paul Hinman, we have the Wild Rose Independence Party, and we have each and every one of you here to fight for the things we all believe in. Prioritizing Alberta, economic freedom, community and family values, and individual opportunity. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you, Drew. Well, one question.
We want to vote for you, but we
Thank
want to
you.
vote Wild Rose, so what are we gonna do? You wanna?
I'll be totally honest. I'm very, very grateful that I started to speak up a year and a half ago. We all have a dear friend who passed away 2 or 3 years ago named Link Byfield. And at one of Danny Hozak's conferences, the economic education that he was talking about, Link gave this great presentation about how our Westminster system went offside, started to fall apart, when government backbenchers like I was, stopped speaking up on behalf of their constituents and started to think they had to do whatever the Premier or the Prime Minister said so they might get a cabinet spot someday. That's right. So I decided, okay, Kenny made us all these promises. I decided, let's give him a year to see if he'll meet expectations. A year later, it was clear that he had no intention of being anywhere near a grassroots-driven party. It was top-down. He had no intention of picking a fight with Ottawa. He had no question of it, and no desire to enhance our economic freedom. I decided it was my time to speak up, and the first opportunity I had was over the Fair Deal panel, demanding that we take the risk and work hard, which Albertans want, to get a fair deal with Ottawa or to achieve our independence. And so I was by myself then. 2 or 3 months after that, MLA Angela Pitt and I joined the anti-lockdown caucus. The fact that we were locked down, our civil liberties were totally taken away, and all the problems that went with that, all of a sudden there was 2 of us. Then you might remember there were 6 of us. Rick Bale called it the 6-pack, where 6 of us signed a letter saying, shame on the Premier for moving the goalposts. Then there was 16 of us, plus 2, that signed another letter demanding the Premier Kenny open up the economy, restore our civil liberties, those kind of things. So I guess what I'm saying is I kind of slowed down a bit so I could build a team, go with more than just by myself. And when I was speaking up, when Premier Kenny did something right, which wasn't all that often, but when he had a regional approach to COVID, I said, I think he's basically got it right, a regional approach. I think we had 4 cases in Cypress County, 40 Mile County, Medicine Hat, and okay, that's at least gives us more control of our life. But when he came out and he caused all that harm for no reason, cost us $10 million when he moved the AISH payments by 3 days for no reasons. I mean, if there's managerial issues, that's a different thing. Don't cause hardship without causing it. When he didn't pick a fight with Ottawa, when he said, you either love your country or you don't, those kind of things, then I said he was exactly wrong. So got to the point where we're building a bit of a team. So where I'm at now, and then when I did get kicked out the caucus about 7 or 8 weeks ago, it was mostly initiated by my colleague Todd Lowen. Todd came out one morning demanding his resignation. And when a respectful, solid, conservative guy like Todd Lowen gets to that point, you know how bad the culture is and how much it's off track. And I was a little surprised, to be honest, that I was ejected from caucus that day, because Premier Kenny had been saying, no, I welcome Drew's ideas, I welcome Drew's debate, I welcome his disagreement, but I guess not. So, so I guess what I'm saying is I'm talking to my ex-colleagues a lot, I'm talking to people around Alberta a lot. Just in the last 2 weeks, I've been at Maverick, PPC, and the Alberta Advantage Party as well. The sentiment that's in this room is very, very common in those rooms as well. And I guess I'll be honest in the sense that the 2 big dates that are coming up in the fall that everybody is telling me they want to see what happens first is October 18th is not only our municipal election day, it's our ending equalization referendum. Vote yes to an equalization. There's a lot of Albertans that believe that vote should be 85 or 90% to finally end equalization. The $670 billion we've sent to Ottawa since 1960. There's a lot of Albertans that think that because of Premier Kennedy's low popularity, we might lose that thing. And there's a lot of Albertans that are wanting to see what happens, to see if that will force him to leave as our Premier. And then the second date that's important is the UCP AGM, is November 19th, 20th, and 21st. There are some people that are hopeful that he will finally recognize it, that he will be standing like Jim Prentice was, with 9 or 10 MLAs and 20 people in the room, because everywhere I go, people do not support Jason Kenney and the UCP party anymore. And so sometime between October 18th and November 20th are the times that I'm looking at making a decision. I'm spending, and thank you for the question, I'm spending a lot of time polling and talking to my constituents as well. We've got lots of polls going out. We welcome and want all of your feedback on that. Yeah, I know, like, ever since, I'm so honored and grateful to represent Cypress Medicine Hat, and ever since I've been doing it for 10 years, it's been the same things. We need governments that spends less so we can have lower taxes. We need more freedoms. We need to work for a fair deal with Ottawa. And let's get behind somebody that's going to do that. And that's why I'm here tonight.
Appreciate that, but I'm going to make one quick comment, and Drew, you probably won't appreciate it, but you can't sit on the sidelines to decide when it's time to do it. We need you now. And we don't need to do any polling or anything else. There's a time when you got to stand up and do what the right thing is, and you've been standing up against the Premier, and you need to continue down and to actually stand up in a party that's going to be significant and move forward. But we need people to join now, not be watching and waiting and saying, well, we'll see where the numbers go. But anyways, I just want to say thanks to each and every one of you. This is a fight for our freedom. This is a fight for our future. And if we don't recognize it and roll up our sleeves and start doing it now, Drew, we're going to be too late. I don't know that we have enough time to say, well, let's wait and see this. That there is no fair deal with Ottawa, and it's sad to me that Justin has perpetrated that propaganda to think that if we vote even at 100% that equalization is wrong, the other 90% of Canadians are going to shrug their shoulders. And that's what we need to be doing to them. When we're collecting our own taxes, having our own police force, and they say that what we're doing is wrong, we just shrug our shoulders. No more the other way where we're the ones that get shrugged off and can't do what we need to do. This is a fight. We're up for it. We can do it. We'll be successful. And God bless each and every one of you who came out here tonight. Let's build our CAs and let's start donating money. We need the money to be on the road, to get the pamphlets. There's so much we need to do. And let's dwarf the UCP and show them the real spirit of freedom and prosperity and just that family value that's missing and that individuality that they're stripping away our freedoms. But thank you very much, and I'll stay to answer more questions.
We should turn our mics off now before.
Where do we send the money?
Right now, I'm actually, the parties said to just keep campaigning. So I would appreciate if you went to my website, paulhinton.com. I don't have, if you want to send a check or do it online. Or I don't do any banking all day. Okay, then let me put an address on there for you. Or where's my phone here? Do you have your phone? I'll put it in there. Or what? Yep, my phone number. Just a minute, let me grab my phone now.
When I first started the company I work for now, I spent over 2.5 years just as a laborer. The only reason I got to be a driver was because the economy crashed.
No, my phone's on the wall.
Okay. Well, then let's put down here.
That's my card you're taking now.
Yeah, I'm going to give it back.
Oh, okay.
I'm putting the information here.